Barbara, great to see you today. First of all, thank you for inviting us to your home to talk about a very special concert that took place last night, and maybe we'll have a bit of a chat about some of your previous albums. And you've got a new album coming up as well, haven't you?
I have indeed, yes. It's coming out in the new year, but I'm awfully glad to have got last night over. It was a big night for me.
I mean, the concert last night, it was filmed for your, I suppose it's your debut DVD. I know people are going to say, oh, I've got a Barbara Dickson DVD, but that was really just a reissue of an earlier video performance, wasn't it?
That's right. And I think it was. I was trying to think about this. I'm glad you've just given me the date. I'm useless with dates.
The Albert Hall.
And it was at the Albert Hall, and it was 1987. I kept thinking it was 1986, and then last night when I was coming home from Spilsby, I thought, couldn't be 1986 because I had my first son then, and I would have had a great big bump. So it was 1987. The bump had arrived by then. And you're absolutely right. It was a video directed by Mike Mansfield. Right. But when I was with my previous management, I was always saying to them, we should do a DVD because for me, the people who eventually buy the DVD will hear me saying, if it's still there and not on the cutting room floor, that in the 20 years since that video was recorded at the Albert Hall, I have changed hugely. My repertoire has changed. I've gone completely away from the mainstream of pop music, which I was still in then. And I've got all these fantastic songs that have now been captured for posterity last night. So this DVD is not just me saying, hey, I've got a new DVD out. There's 20 years of, looking back. Yes, exactly. It is a catch-up.
Why did it take 20 years? That's the obvious question, because artists like yourself, I mean, I suppose there are some people who probably lost track of you after January, February in your pop career. The thing I like more recently about your albums is that, and one of the albums is so aptly titled Full Circle, is that you kind of come round again to what you were doing before the pop world cottoned onto you.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I'm glad, as we say, Troy and I are always saying, he gets it. And actually, you've got it, which is that I started singing when I was a schoolgirl, and I started singing folk music when I was a teenager. I was 27 when I went to do John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert in Liverpool. So there was 10 years of me singing folk music. This is just like a potted history. Then I became a pop star shortly afterwards. I was only a pop star for 10 years of that time. But really between 1975 and 1985, I was a pop star. Since 1985, I've not been a pop star. I've worked in the theatre, I've never sung extremes of music, but I've done, since 1985, mature music, songs, theatre songs, Brecht and, sophisticated stuff like Sondheim, adult music. And peppered throughout that has been traditional music and serious, thoughtful music. However, people still have a photograph of me on Top of the Pops with curly hair singing January, February. There's nothing I can do about that.
No.
Now, it's not like confessing to be a member of the SS formally. So I don't have to cover it up, but it does irritate me that people say, aren't you the person who sang January, February? And I have to say, yes, it's true. But as you just alluded to in your preamble, it's a very small part of what I did, but it was such a high-profile part. I think it must be like somebody who's been in Star Wars, but then goes to the RSC. And people just say, please, can you, tell us that line you did when you were a robot in Star Wars, and you must think, shut up.
I suppose ultimately, though, because television is this all-seeing, all-doing medium, and people see you on things like The Two Ronnies and Top of the Pops. And bearing in mind, when those shows were running, TV audiences were massive. And that's kind of maybe stayed in their minds. But the pop thing, I mean, some people get sucked into the pop thing and then spat out 10 years later like you could have been. and that's it. Your career's over. Yeah, but you had the career that you had before that. We're talking albums, Morning Comes Quickly, and Answer Me. There was some pretty classy material on there anyway. The pinnacle of your pop stardom would have been January, February, but that really, if anything, is probably a one-off.
It is interesting, yet on that album, the album which has January, February on it, which was very high-profile pop material, there's about 5 songs written by me on that album.
Yes.
So although Alan Tarney produced the album, and it was very enjoyable to work with Alan Tarney, I had a profile at that time as a songwriter as well as a singer of that material. And I'm not sneering at the success I had in any way.
No, of course
and
not.
I love it. But it's when people say to me, why don't you sing tracks from something 27 years ago or something? And I think, I am not in the nostalgia business.
No.
Now, that I have to clarify that and say that Answer Me, Another Suitcase in Another Hall, Caravans, and I Know Him So Well are very, very important milestones in my career, regardless of what that career is about now. They are important, and I would never willfully throw out material that was so close to the hearts of people. There are people in my audiences who would say to me, we met the first time we went out together, and they're celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary or something. They say, we met, and when we heard Caravans on the radio or Another Suitcase was a song, or we came to see you in concert and you sang that, we've never forgotten it. That's part of people's lives. It's part of my life. And I would never run away from that. But I always say to people, I was actually rather pleased to see that someone like Bob Dylan said something similar recently, but I'm not putting myself in the same league as him. But I am not in the nostalgia business.
No.
I never look back.
I think what it is, that particular era, if you like, forms part of the picture.
Yes.
But it doesn't define you as an artist.
No, it's
and
not.
sometimes people mistake that as being, well, that's what she does. And yet, really, if they saw the bigger picture, it's just merely a small part of it.
It is a small part of it, and I'm sure that someone like Nigel Kennedy has got it like 500% worse than me, which is that people would expect Nigel Kennedy to be turning up, you know, in his leathers because he was foolish enough to do that at one point in his life. But you cannot take away from Nigel Kennedy.
No.
He's a very good player.
He is.
He's a fantastic player. And, you know, so the fact that he, you know, he was lightweight for a while, that's okay. I mean, the reason I'm not apologising again, but I didn't go for stardom, you know, I don't like stardom. Anyone who knows anything about me will say she runs a mile from the trappings of success. You won't see me hanging out at premieres and stuff. If I had a choice, I wouldn't do that. I don't like it. I don't like sort of rubbing shoulders with celebrities. And nowadays, what passes for celebrity is positively hideous.
It is.
And I don't want to. If someone calls me a celebrity, I take that as a personal insult because I just can't bear it. But nevertheless, I have done such a variety of work from the interesting thing for me is what was the transition in my earliest life when I was 17 or 16 from being a Beatles fan who'd loved the Everly Brothers to going absolutely full throttle towards the arms of traditional music. That is the thing that it's what I say to Troy, what is that does that? And Troy and I have talked about this. And he said to me, he calls it The Unseen Stream, which is an album title of his.
That's right.
And it is the thing in you that makes you respond to a certain type of music. It might be listening to Jerusalem in the Albert Hall. It could be listening to Miles Davis's solos. It could be listening to Mahler. It could be listening to George Formby. It doesn't matter what it is. But there's something in most people that touches a chord in them. And with me, it's traditional music. It's basically music of the British Isles. It's the Western fringes, the Celtic music, the stuff with the drones, the stuff with the big held notes, the middles taken out of the chords. As soon as I hear that, my heart turns over.
Right.
And it is like, it's the best way to describe it. It is utterly through me like Blackpool is on the stick of rock. It's just there.
Your two recent albums, which, your new one, which is due to be released shortly, which is Time and Tide, and Full Circle, have both been produced by Troy Donockley. And whilst there's a very, very strong traditional element running through those albums, they are still incredibly commercially well-crafted albums. So there are people who are sometimes put off by the tag, if you like, traditional. They think, and I spoke with Troy about this last night, and to some people it's still Aaron Sweater's Fingers in the Ear and Twigs in Your Real Ale.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I quite like that myself. But at the same time, traditional music covers so many other little subgenres and little avenues you can go down. And I think sometimes people miss out on that by dismissing traditional music because there are people who would listen to your Full Circle album and go, that's not a traditional album. But there are other people who go, well, actually, it is. In the sense that I can see where she's drawn from that and how we've arrived here.
Yes.
So I think sometimes that people judge a book by its cover when they should just maybe open the book and read a little.
Well, there is a degree of that. I mean, I know that there's a very, very tiny dyed-in-the-wool traditional element within traditional music, which is I think, very. There's a sort of fascist element in it.
It's very insular.
They do not tolerate anything that doesn't seem to go into their sphere of reference. But yet, the wonderful Mike Harding, who kind of embodies folk music in Britain because of his profile on the radio, he has a most wonderful Catholic taste in music.
He's very open-minded, though, Mike,
utterly,
isn't he?
and he likes this, and he'll play Seth Lakeman, and if Seth Lakeman becomes a pop star, all the better for Seth. But nevertheless, the thing that always escapes me with the people who are very dyed-in-the-wool about what traditional music is that they miss the point. Someone like Martin Carthy, who is the god of people who like traditional music in England, I'm qualifying that because he is deeply English, Martin, is fantastically original.
Well, Paul Simon rates him.
He's original. He's original.
Yeah.
He is the Martin Carthy, who was a young, vibrant musician who decided to arrange and play the songs in that way.
Yeah.
And play the guitar. He doesn't put his guitar down because it's not traditional. I mean, there was a very big kind of, rather pole-faced attitude to traditional music in the 1960s when I first got involved in it. And I just say rubbish. That's all rubbish. I mean, music is to be enjoyed, whether it's Morris Men playing on Whit Sunday or whether it's the Moving Hearts of Donal Lunny, what he did. In Ireland, it's really metamorphosed into God knows what now. And in Scotland, you get, people like Phil Cunningham doing wonderful work. Yeah. So all over the place, the music has evolved, and it's very good that it's evolved. But there is still a place for the vintage approach, like the Copper Family and the way Waters and Carthy approach music. Yet they have originality. I love Waters and Carthy. Yeah. But I wouldn't. It's not po-faced. It's joyful.
Well, being po-faced is the complete opposite of what it's meant to be.
Exactly.
Which is,
there's a joy when you see Norma with her triangle giving it loads.
Yeah.
I just love it. It's wonderful music, and I always, like you, feel sad when people say, "Oh, I don't like folk music. Oh my God, I don't like folk music."
Yeah.
And it's like people say, "I hate country and western." Well, they should be forced to listen to Vince Gill, and then it would change their mind forever.
Or Hank Williams.
Oh, yeah, well, yes, if you could go back a while. But then modern artists singing, playing utterly beautifully.
The set list for the DVD, for the performance last night, was a wonderfully eclectic show. So congratulations on that, because I know picking a set list can sometimes be as difficult as performing one.
Yes.
And last night, I think you got it absolutely right. I liked the opening last night, In the Bleak Midwinter, into Here Comes the Sun, which of course I remember from John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert. But the song that, it's still resonating in my head now, Corpus Christi Carol, which is just, that for me was a highlight. The whole gig was great, but I'm still got that tune in my head, and I'll be on the train and that'll still be in my head. And I think a lot of people can draw from that. Because that's not just a piece of music. That touches somebody's soul. I know that sounds probably very pretentious.
I think it's supposed to touch your soul. Sorry for interrupting you, but
No.
I want it to touch your soul.
Well, it did.
Because it must touch your soul, because so much of what we have today does not touch your soul. It doesn't even, you're not even allowed to mention your soul these days in case people get offended. So I think that your soul being touched by anything that we do, I don't think that is pretentious of you to say that, because I'm very pleased that it works for you, because again, when Troy and I, when we were working on Full Circle, we desperately wanted to make wonderful music that is, it really draws on what I said about the West Coast, this Western British tradition of the scales, the notes, the weather, the air, everything that is that world is the world that I really feel most comfortable in. I am a romantic person. I'm quite prosaic and practical, but I have this huge romanticism when it comes to art and music and anything at all, buildings.
Yeah.
I really see the soul in that. And then suddenly, Troy and I, after having known each other since 1994, we met each other, but we hadn't worked together all the time. And we'd never got close to making an album together. But I went to Troy for advice about whether he thought that I could make this kind of album. And he said, yes, you can. And I said, how can I do it? And he said, we do it together. Yeah. You come and you and I will do this kind of album. He said, because I think I know what you are talking about. We understand each other perfectly, and he has making records now is much more of a cottage industry.
Yes.
So it's really a massive commitment to make an album, but we are just completing the second one. By the time people see our interview, it will be out.
What I can tell that there's a great amount of romantic feelings in you because of some of the material that you cover and some of the material that you write yourself. Obviously, there's some classical elements in there which I have to mention. Ralph Vaughan Williams, Henry Purcell, who again are known as romantics in the classical world.
Yes.
What was it? Was that what it was that attracted you to those particular composers?
Well, I've always wanted to sing When I Am Laid in Earth for years and years and years. I once did it as a piece when I first went to London, and I used to go to a singing teacher in London. It was really to increase it wasn't to change my voice in any, it was just to increase my stamina. It's quite useful actually to, just for anybody watching this, just to, if they want to sing and they run out of puff or they run out of voice and they need to sing a lot, it's good to get a few little systems in place to help yourself. So I went to this woman called Betty Rowe. Funnily enough, I met Jim Broadbent there for the first time, but he used to go to her as well. I think he was going up for a musical and he said he didn't get the part, but it was very funny. But Betty Rowe gave me this song because she thought I would sing it really well. And I'd known it for years, but finally recorded it with Troy. But the Ralph Vaughan Williams, I had a child in a concert singing it at my children's prep school here in Lincolnshire. And it was just a little girl of 12 singing it with a piano accompaniment. And I went, I love that song.
I
didn't realise that the text was but from Verlaine, and it had been translated by Mabel Dearmer. And, of course, Percy Dearmer worked with Ralph Vaughan Williams on the hymn book. So presumably that's how he knew his wife, Mabel. But, the words and the ebb and flow of it and the piano accompaniment is just, it's perfection in classical music. It's not even like classics. It's a real proper song, isn't it?
It is. And I think the way that it's weird, because you can deconstruct songs as much as you like, and you can still be none the wiser having done it, and some things just work well together.
So
and
beautiful.
That's it, you know.
And the space in it, there's loads of space, and you can hear the singer breathing, and I just love it. And I love the idea that the man in prison, because it's about him being in jail. So he listens to the tree above the roof, and the bell drowsily rings, and the birds singing, and him imagining the world outside the prison. Yeah. It's just so beautiful. I mean, it's just touching. So those songs, those classical songs, I wasn't saying, okay, let's impress everybody. Let's do the K for O or something. Let's do that. Yeah. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to do songs which will be part of what Troy and I would call our world. That is this. All the other songs, everything on Full Circle hangs together as part of the whole. Yes. And you've noticed that. The classical songs. There's the Faithless Love. There's contemporary songs in there. Yeah. And there's the epic Corpus Christi Carol and the Eriskay Love Song. And those kind of big traditional things are nestling in amongst this other stuff. And you don't pick Faithless Love out and say, that's a load of rubbish because it's not as important as Sky Above the Roof, let's get rid of that. It worked. They all work together. And Time and Tide is a more, I would say, slightly more self-confident version of Full Circle.
It started off as Full Circle 2. That was the working title, wasn't it? So
yes, Full Circle 2, we called it until about 2 months ago. Yeah. We just love working together. And we've got more tradition. It's more of the same, really. Yeah. We're doing it. We've done a version of Going Back, which is a song I have had in what I call my shirt box. I've had that I've had that in there for 30 years. I've always wanted to do Going Back, and I've never done it. And Alan Clyde, who runs my website, last night said to me, "Oh, the Dusty Springfield song," and I said, "Well, it's not a Dusty Springfield song to me. King. It's Goffin and King, but I know it from the Byrds."
Well, I know the Byrds version as well. It's not that Dusty's version isn't great, because it is great, but it's a wonderful song.
It is a lovely song. I mean, it's a pop song, but it's a great pop song, and it is rather sad. And I think it's also quite sad to sing it when you're older.
Yeah, because it's a bittersweet song.
It has reflection in it, and I looked at the lyric and thought, really great, because I was saying to the band when we were up at Water rehearsing, I said to them, something, for me, it's an interesting thing when I pick up a song. I mean, very often I've contemplated singing songs over the years by various people, and I've got the lyric and the top line sorted out, and I've been sent the stuff by the publisher, and I've looked at the lyrics and said, can't do that, it's rubbish. Yeah. The tune's been good, and it's had a good arrangement on the original, and I've decided to cover it, and I just thought it's rubbish. So all of the lyrics that I've ever sung, I mean, I suppose including January, February, which is the least lyrically sophisticated of anything I've ever sung, probably. It is still has a degree of depth to it.
You seem, as you come across to me, as being very attracted to, if you like, singer-songwriters, but the songs are very important for you. I mean, you covered songs by Dylan. Gerry Rafferty is another favourite. He's a favourite of mine as well. And people like that. I mean, is it an instant thing for you when you do hear a song? You hear a song and think, oh, I love that song. I'd love to cover that.
Well, I used to do this all the time because I had so much pressure put on me by record companies to do covers on my albums. They always wanted me to cover things, and they were, because I don't know, that maybe they thought that familiarity is just pathetic, isn't it, really?
I suppose your first hit for a lot of people was a cover.
Yeah, and they say, but I don't even think it was quite as intelligent as that. I think they thought, oh, we'll get her to do stuff that people know already, and so it'll get played on the radio because people.
That still happens now, though.
Yeah, a double whammy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it depends on the covers. So the reason I got interested in cover versions was purely because if I got there first, they'd have to do what I selected, because I've never done songs. There was only one song I was ever persuaded to do that I didn't want to do, and everybody said, you've got to do this, it'll be great. And actually, I can't even remember what it's called. It was on a live album I did, but it was a one studio track in the early 80s, and it was rubbish, and I should never have done it. I didn't like it. But as far as cover versions are concerned, I've done all sorts of things, and some more successful than others. And I always gravitated towards the things which meant something, which had some kind of message. And there would be loads of people out there saying, for goodness sake, what's she doing covering that? I mean, it could never be bettered. I also drew the line sometimes as well for that reason. Somebody would say, you know something, you should do that. And I would say, you're wrong. And they would say, why? And I would say, it cannot be bettered. Yeah. It cannot be bettered.
How then, if I can be devil's advocate here, do you approach a Dylan song? Because don't think twice. I mean, there are people who probably don't even think that's a Dylan song.
Yeah.
But I know someone who didn't think it was a Dylan song. So, I mean, something like that. The times they are changing, very, very well known. And I suppose don't think twice. If you're a Dylan fan, you know anything about music, you probably know as well. But there are people out there who probably don't know that's a Bob Dylan song.
Well, I had an album of Dylan material which came out in 1992. And the way I approached the project was, I thought it would be a good thing to do. I thought people who liked me probably wouldn't like Bob Dylan singing. And people who liked Bob Dylan might like to hear somebody else doing the songs.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think the dyed-in-the-wool early Dylan fans who would have liked his original versions on Freewheeling and all that stuff, they wouldn't particularly go for what Ian Lynn and I did with that album, because you're talking 1992 here, so that it was quite a big production. There's a lot of electronic stuff in there. Now I'm sure that if Ian was sitting in the room, he would say, if I was doing it in 2007, I would make it much more organic than it was. But anyway, it is what it is. And there was a lot of heart and soul went into it. It was very seriously approached, and the songs were very carefully chosen. But I am an enormous fan of Dylan's early material. Now, I can't exactly tell you why, whether it's because I was there and it meant more to me, or whether the songs are in fact better songs. But all I can say is those songs, most of the songs that I did on the album are fairly important, apart from When I Paint My Masterpiece, and there was, there were one or two others that were kind of lightweight, but I really liked a lot. But I think Dylan is a genius. There is no doubt about it. And I don't think it's sacrilege to re-record music by someone that you think is a genius.
No, absolutely
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, I think if you're trying to copy them, or you're trying to in some way
point.
ingratiate yourself.
No point.
I don't think there's any point at all. But if you do think, I love this material and I can work with it. And in fact, Rab Noakes told me that there was a little snippet of one of my recordings on a recent film about Dylan.
Very nice.
They used a little piece of my album.
Well, that's acceptance then, isn't it?
And I think Dylan heard it as well. I think Dylan was sent a copy by Columbia, who did that album.
You did a wonderful version of The Times They Were Changing last night. And Nick Holland, I have to say, bless him.
He's got such a sexy voice, hasn't he?
And it's big shoes to fill, because on the album, Gerry Rafferty sang that with you, and they're pretty big shoes to fill.
Gerry did a wonderful vocal for us, and Ian Lynn, again, who produced that album, Ian arranged the song in such a way that it would appeal to Gerry, and it would really make Gerry sound wonderful. He almost did it like a Gerry Rafferty song.
Yes.
And we had we tell a funny story that in the middle, over the instrumental part, when Nick, when Troy's playing the guitar solo, and the three of us are saying ooh, 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 which is a real Rafferty signature.
Yeah.
Ooh, because he was always doing those oohs in little banks. So Pete and I, the three of us, were doing these oohs. But when we did them on the recording, we wanted Gerry to sing them. So we got Gerry in the studio and he did his bit. And we said, just before we go, Gerry, will you sing the oohs for us? And he said, so what do you want me to do? So we got him in the studio. He took ages to do them. He didn't recognise the homage that was in there. We had written a Gerry Rafferty little section for him to sing.
And he didn't notice it.
He just does it automatically
in
everything he ever does. But he it took him ages to do it because he hadn't sort of dreamed it up.
You've covered Gerry Rafferty a couple of times.
I've done the Royal Mile, I did City to City.
I loved City to City when I heard that. That was a single as well. That should have been a big hit.
Oh, it was great.
It was your first album for CBS,
that's
if I remember rightly.
That's City to City.
And that should have been a big hit, sadly.
I loved it. And I did 2 train songs at that time. I did the City of New Orleans as well. And
Steve Goodman song.
Yeah, I used to do 2 songs about trains and City to City. And I did the Royal Mile as well. I've done loads of Gerry, Over My Head. I've done...
You're doing one on the current tour as well, I believe. Or you did one last night on the DVD.
The Right Moment, which was the title track.
Which is a lovely song. I mean, do you think... the thing I can't understand is, he had his little, if you like, everybody thinks, Baker Street or Stuck in the Middle. But I think he's wildly underrated.
He hasn't done a lot of getting out there and sort of playing to people. So I think there are great Gerry Rafferty aficionados out there who know all about him and hang on his every word. But he doesn't come up these days with that much work. No. So I think a lot of people are slightly having to hang on to his past repertoire.
But even with the older songs, they seem to pick the same songs all the time. It's always Stuck in the Middle, or it's always Baker Street or Night Owl, and I'm going, oh no, there's way more to him than that. And further back, I mean, one of my favourite albums by him was Can I Have My Money Back? There's a beautiful track on there, which I'm surprised that more people haven't done it. Mary Skeffington, which is a beautiful song.
And Rab sang, Rab was on Mary Skeffington too. Do you remember a song called Whatever's Written in Your Heart is all that matters? Yes. That was on. I did backing vocals for a couple or 3 of Gerry's albums when he needed another singer, and Whatever's Written in Your Heart, I sang on that. And when I saw Gerry last, he said to me that James Taylor had written him a letter. Years after that album came out, like 20 years afterwards, to say, Dear Gerry Rafferty, I really love that song.
Wow. I'd have that framed in my living room, in fact, over the fireplace.
Isn't that great? And I said, you got a letter from him. Well, of course, James Taylor is my hero.
Again, another song by James Taylor. You did Millwork.
Isn't that a great song?
Well, that was strange because I came to that song. I'm very remiss of me, but I came to that song via Bette Midler, of all people. Bette Midler did a great version of it in the 70s.
I've never heard that.
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, she used to do it in a live set, and she tore the place apart with it. I mean, you'd have people literally crying. Yeah. But it's a great song. Yep. And the great thing is, of course, James Taylor is still playing as well as ever.
James Taylor is, if anything, in my opinion, much better. When I listen to his early songs, not the songs, but his early performances now, I think, I'm not putting myself in the same class as James Taylor, but actually I'm much better now than I used to be. I think I sound better now. I've got much more richness now. James Taylor is a better singer now than he was when he was 25.
You know what that is? That's life.
Yes. And it is life, and it's experience and soul and all sorts of stuff. Plus his voice has broadened out. Yeah. And he's just superlative. I mean, he's an inspiration to me, actually, because I just think he never looks back. He does sing Fire and Rain and Sweet Baby James in his concerts. Why wouldn't he? They're fantastic
There's
songs.
so many James Taylor songs to choose,
Yeah.
though. What was it about Millworker that sort of attracted you?
Well, I think what happened was I heard a live set that he did. He went out when Don Grolnick was still alive. They went round the States and they did a massive tour. He hadn't done a lot of live work, I don't think, for a while. And he went out and he really got back into playing live again and started to enjoy it. And then they did this massive tour and they recorded certain nights on the tour. And the wonderful band were there. And he was just so good. And one of the songs was Millworker. He kind of revamped it from the way he did it before. And it had much more, it was a really steady pace, and I just loved it, identified with it, because I actually I quite like political songs in a way.
Yeah.
I do like political songs, and that's my old unreconstructed folk singing mid-60s coming out. I mean, I can still, wear diamond earrings, but sing political songs. It's the way, it's the sort of way I am.
That's from the Ewan McCall school.
Yeah, Ewan McCall would go, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But nevertheless, it is interesting to say that I'm not a political person, really. I'm certainly not an activist in any way, but I love that song. I love that
It's
line
one of those.
about,
I think it's one of those things where you say, "Oh, I can get my head around that."
And yes, exactly. And I love the line about, she'll work in the mills because she's paid and she needs to work and she'll never meet the boss.
Yeah.
But, it's okay.
I think actually, so there's probably lots of people been there in that
Absolutely,
situation.
and there's still a lot of people now.
I guess there are.
So there is. It's the voice of the small person, really. A small voice.
I agree.
And that I love that. I love it. I remember when I did it in 7 Ages of Woman, when I did it in the theatre. My director gave me a shirt and a pair of gloves, like working gloves, to hold. That's all I did. But for the audience, it
It's if you like, it's very symbolic.
It was symbolic, and that's why he's a clever director, Chris Bond, and he directed me in Blood Brothers. But he just gave me a working shirt and a pair of gloves. So when I sang those words, I
Sometimes,
was
though,
that
you
woman.
see, less is more. Sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you've mentioned Blood Brothers. I mean, Willie Russell must be surely a very important part of your life. John Paul George, Ringo and Bird, Blood Brothers. I have to say, the version of Easy Terms last night was lump in the throat time. And coming from Merseyside as I do, obviously that play strikes a note with me. Although I'm not obviously of that generation, I can remember my nan and her sisters were of that generation. And it's a wonderful song. I mean, parts like that come along very, very rarely. And yet you weren't too sure originally about playing that role, were you?
Well, I couldn't act, basically. I'd never acted.
I'd never have known that when I saw you do it.
I wasn't
honest.
an actress, I was very lucky because actually my mother's a Scouser, and there are a lot of women in that family. I've still got two cousins who come from just off Upper Parliament Street in Liverpool. So my Liverpool pedigree is pretty good, It's
well, all the women in my family going back are very strong. That they breed them tough in Liverpool.
That's right. Well, my mother's mother, my Granny Mally, latterly, she lived in Carrington Street, just off Upper Parliament Street, and it was my auntie Ivy's house, and my two cousins Ivy and Sylvia brought up there. We used to visit in the summer. So the environment of the Johnstone family at the beginning, when Mrs Johnston's husband leaves her and the twins are born and all that, it's quite interesting actually for me, because it was rather like Carrington Street, and the neighbours, I remember, and I was coming from a small town in Scotland, but I used to go so many times that I got used to the neighbours and the big Catholic families, and there were people of multicolours in Liverpool.
The doors were always open.
First time I ever saw a black face was in Liverpool.
Yeah.
And Chinese people, still a lot of Chinese people there, and so the huge kind of the smells of the city, the walls, the gable ends where we used to play with the balls against the walls, and skipping and bursting tar bubbles.
But you know why that is, though? Because Liverpool is a port.
Yes, of
So
course.
that's why it's so cosmopolitan.
And it was wonderfully cosmopolitan, and I loved it. So actually, I bring a lot of life to Mrs Johnstone, because when Willie said, would you want to have a bash at this? Do you want to do it? Having sung, you see, I sang Easy Terms for him on a demo, and so he was sold. He wanted me. He loved what I did with it. He loved the sound, and he thought, anyway. So I did decide to do it. I was so frightened. I was hanging on by a thread to my sanity. Chris Bond is the most wonderful director, and he just sat me down, and he said, "You can do this. I will help you, but you can do this." And we went through the script and we did it, and eventually I stepped out the 4th of January or whatever it was, 1983. Once I had a husband and I was away, and first time I got a laugh, I couldn't believe it, because I'd never had a laugh before. People didn't laugh at my singing, thankfully. No. And I got this laugh and I went, oh my God, that's a laugh. Okay, right. Wait till it subsides, then speaking. So I had to learn all this. I worked with a great actor in the shape of George Costigan, who played Mickey. I used to hang on to him for support and love and all sorts of things. And I met my husband, Oliver. He was the stage manager. So it was a very wonderful, momentous, volcanic time, really. And I won the Best Actress in a Musical from the Olivier Awards. They were called the Society of West End Theatres then, and I could not believe it. I was sitting in the audience with Willie. But Willie, of course, the reason that Willie looms large in my life is that Willie came from folk music.
Yes.
He was very involved in folk music, and that's how I know him. And I met him in Edinburgh when he'd come up to do something at the Edinburgh Festival, and I used to stay with him and Anne in Liverpool, and I went there. So I knew him a long, long time. When he did John Paul George, he asked me to do that. He was unknown then, virtually, apart from in Liverpool. John Paul George Ringo and Bout was the first time. He won the Evening Standard Award for that in London. And then, of course, in the interim, he'd done Shirley Valentine and all sorts of stuff. He's a big star. But Blood Brothers... so wonderful. And
critically did very well, but commercially, initially, it wasn't a big success. It's kind of grown over the last 24, nearly 25 years now.
It is.
25 years, wasn't it, in January?
It is extraordinary what you say, and I've never been able to figure that out. It was a wonderful production, the original production. It was so fantastic. The band was wonderful. Somebody has just made a DVD out of an ancient old video recording of a dress rehearsal, which Willie sent to me, and I've got it. It's very poor quality, but Oliver and I were able to watch it because, of course, we worked on it, and therefore it's very meaningful to us. And all the original cast and everything, watching them again, and watching myself doing the scenes I did, and it was quite interesting, really very interesting. But to me, it is fantastic. It was very, very dark.
It was.
And
think about
very, very funny.
There was no happy ending either at the end of it, which is very unusual. If you think musicals, it's all jazz hands. And at the end of Blood Brothers, it wasn't. It was not a happy ending.
Bill Kenwright was very keen for me to kneel down and cross the hands of the twins after they were shot at the end when I've had to do Blood Brothers, and I refused to do that because I don't see Mrs Johnstone as crying, weeping tears, and...
Well, she's not a victim. No,
No.
absolutely not.
And I absolutely draw the line.
Right.
So I just stand there, and I find it much more powerful for me to do that.
Yeah.
So that was in my original remit from Chris Bond, and I refused to move from it. But they've been very kind. The Kenwright production asked me regularly to come and be Mrs Johnstone again, and I come in like a tornado and sort of shoot right through the middle of the way they do it, and sort of speed it up. It doesn't last so long when I'm in it. And away I go again. I come into the Empire, or I'll maybe do it somewhere else for them. But I do believe now I'm probably the oldest Mrs Johnstone in the world, and I really think it's not so good. I mean, I love the original production so much, and critically, you're absolutely right. It didn't really work. The production worked, but a lot of people said they didn't want to watch a show with an unhappy ending that was all about Larry Scousers. You know, they didn't want to see a show like that. Now it's become a cult sort of thing.
Well, it's huge. I mean, it's not just confined to England. It's gone on tour in America, and I'm thinking, good God, what do the Americans think of this?
Oh, dear.
Because you just think, it's weird. Because when something... I've always thought that something like that takes a long time to kick in and be accepted. Once it is accepted, that's it. There's, you know, it's just taken as that it is successful, and it's always been successful. And people don't realise that sometimes there's a real hard, long lead-in before that success kicks in.
I also have to say that theatre productions do not improve with age. They're like pianos. They're best when they're new. If they're good when they're new, they should leave them. And then, at some point in the future, you know, they'll do them at the RSC with a small company, and they'll be fantastic again.
I have to say, though, having seen the original performance and the original cast with you in early 1983, and I saw it again about 5 years ago, and it still gets you. I have to be honest. I thought, oh, God, this really is good. And although it's not a happy ending, it's a very powerful ending.
Well, it has to be. It has to be powerful because of what it is.
Because when I first saw that, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a big shock. I really was. Yes. Oh, my God.
Because the prophecy has to be fulfilled. Because in the first scene, how they were born and they died on the self-same day, it has to come true. Yeah. Because, you know, that's the way that Willie constructed it. It's a ballad format.
Yeah, I mean, do you kind of think of that as a little piece of your own, though? I mean, surely you must, because, I mean, it was an amazing...
Well, Mrs Johnstone, I love Mrs Johnstone. And I have to answer that question consummately, was once when it started, at the very beginning, 2 or 3 days in, when it had got fabulous reviews from everybody in Liverpool, I was talking to a man in Wales who was talking to me down the line. He hadn't seen the show, and I was in Radio Merseyside talking to him on his radio show, and he was talking about, you know, you've just opened in this new show in Liverpool, Blood Brothers. He said to me, what does it feel like playing a slut?
He wouldn't have said that if he'd have been in Liverpool, would he?
He wouldn't have said that if he'd seen it.
No.
And I was not happy at all, and I was really, really cross, and I said, Mrs Johnstone is not a slut.
No.
I said, she might not have any money, but she is a very respectable woman. I was really, really cross with him. And I still feel like that now. It really angers me to think, what an ignorant thing to say. And therefore, if you're asking me if I feel anything for Mrs Johnstone, I am Mrs Johnstone.
Okay,
she's never been taken away from me.
No.
She's still
that's
there.
Nice to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, the musical theatre side of things, obviously, that you're very well known for a number of pieces. Obviously, that is one of them. Another Suitcase, Another Hall in Evita, which must have been great again at the time. Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice at the time really were at the peak. And I suppose, although that wasn't the first thing they'd done, I think that possibly was the best that they'd done. I think Jesus Christ Superstar, Joseph, and Evita really was, for me, the pinnacle of their work. And I know they didn't do anything after that, really, did they?
No, they didn't. I mean,
they went their separate ways after that. And I think they were wise to do that.
I think it's true. I think they had different ideas of what musical theatre should be. I was not, of course, involved in the stage show of Evita. I was only on the concept album. But they'd already done this concept album idea with Jesus Christ Superstar, which had worked well for them. So they really had, they gave it a lot of thought. And originally they thought they thought of me for Evita.
Right.
But I don't have the sort of voice that could have done that. And they asked Julie to do it, and then they said to me, well, we love you. Would you do this one song? Would you do the Mistress's song? But Andrew made me sing in an unnatural key for my voice. It's much too high for me.
It's a shame, because it's a great song.
Well, now it's become a great song because of the way that we play it.
Yeah.
It's become much more interesting, and it has much more to it. But I do like the song very much. Yeah. And I think it's happened to all the things that I do, and my old songs. I mean, it's quite interesting that we've just transformed I Know Him So Well quite recently.
Well, I was going to mention that. Again, there's the Tim Rice connection again there with chess. And this time with Benny and Bjorn from ABBA. The arrangement that you performed on the night, last night at the performance you did for the DVD, that is incredible. And it's a really stripped down... like back to basics version. It's not
so
a big
lovely.
production, but I'm paid, bless him. What a wonderful! I was like, wow, this is great.
It is interesting, isn't it? What we've done with it now. That I said to Troy, is there anything we can do with I Know Him So Well? Because I'm bored with 80s power ballads. I can't be doing with it. I mean, they were all right in the 80s, but now it's 2000 and mid 2007, 8. So we just don't want to be doing that. And I am not one for leaving songs alone. I don't want to change them out of all proportion. Some people change the song so that, a song
but
that
you don't recognise it.
You don't recognise it anymore. Or they rush through it and they put them all in a medley and it lasts about 2 minutes.
Either.
It's hideous and it doesn't show due deference to the material. I Know Him So Well is a really good song. Benny Andersson is like a serious songwriter to me. I love Benny Andersson.
Oh, him and Bjorn, I think. They're pop genius.
And, Benny has a lovely kind of gloomy, Scandinavian,
it's a very classical, very European classical approach.
It's got a kind of, Sibelius, Gustav Holst type of thing in his serious music as well, and his arrangements for chess, which were just superlative. But I Know Him So Well is a really nice song, and it's much loved as well amongst my public. So I didn't want to muck around with it, but I said to Troy, could we do it? And he's done a sort of John Renbourn arrangement of I Know Him So Well, which is just, I went, wow, when I heard it. It's just great. And the boys, of course, have to sing really high. It's very difficult because, of course, it being an original female duet. But I think we do it very well, and I think it's much more tender. It's much more.
I think people will be surprised, but pleasantly surprised.
Yes.
Because the song is there. It's not that it's unrecognisable.
Of course not. Everybody knows what it is.
But it's a wonderful take on it. And I commented to Troy on the arrangement, and I just said, wow, it's a great arrangement of that song.
It is a wonderful arrangement, and I'm very, very happy with it. And also we evolved Caravans was the same. Because the Mike Batt original version of Caravans was very, very straight with the London Symphony Orchestra. Caravan.
It's a kitchen sink job, isn't it, really?
And it was all very big orchestral arrangement. But the thing is, the undeniable truth about Caravans is it is a great song.
It is a great song.
It moves people.
Stirring, I think.
It's
people
also it's sort of inspirational. It's a bit like a hymn.
It is.
People say to me, oh my God, I love it so much. And it is the favourite of all my hits. There's no doubt about it. I would be lynched if I didn't sing Caravans in every show I ever did anywhere.
I mean, ultimately, you would have to rearrange that particular song because it was short of taking out the LSO with you every time you did it.
And I wouldn't want to do it that way anyway. That was 1980 as well. So, I mean, I said to Mike Batt, we were emailing each other about something not that long ago, and I said to him, Caravans is the favourite song of my old repertoire. He said that was really nice to hear. But you were talking about the repertoire and the DVD, and I just wanted to say to you that I gave it a huge amount of thought because of the video, which was done in 1987, with 20 years of material to mark on this DVD. I do want people to buy it. I want it to fly off the merchandising stand on my tour. Of course I do. It's a commercial exercise as well. And I want people to look at it and say, wow, look at that, those things are on it. That would be great. But I would always have put Another Suitcase, and I would always have put I Know Him So Well, and I would have always put Caravans. And I would, and because of it being 20 years in the making since the last one, I want Mill Worker. I want the Dylan songs.
Yeah.
I want the Full Circle stuff. And the Donal Ogue, which was from Parcel of Rogues. And see, these are the albums I've made in that interim time. Love Hurts came from Dark End of the Street, which was in the 1990s as well. And I wanted to allude to the history. I just wanted to tick off the little milestones throughout those 20 years. And I didn't want anybody coming up to me and saying, why didn't you sing a track from Dark End of the Street? Why didn't you do that? Because it would be like me saying, I don't like that album, or I don't like those songs. So I did something, and then I hit them with the 3 new tracks from Time and Tide as well, because I want to be current. And I think that explains what you saw me play last night, explains my philosophy in a nutshell about the music I play. It was all there in that show.
Do you think then that there are obviously going to be some people who may have lapsed over the years, but you've obviously got a very hardcore and very closely knit fan base who will be very much aware of what you've been doing over the last 20 years. But there are going to be, there's always going to be people who maybe fall by the wayside and then come back. So for many, this serves 2 purposes. First of all, it's you, if you like, saying, look, this is how we're doing these songs. These are the songs that we've done over the last 20 years. And you're going to enjoy these versions. And also, for those who've maybe lapsed a bit, it's a bit of a kind of catch-up for them. Well, look, this is what you've maybe missed, and here's where I'm going.
Well, yes, I mean, I do hope that is the case. But actually, a lot of people do drop out of your life from audiences, massive audiences of 25 years ago. They'll never come back because they, don't go to concerts probably at all. And they only came to concerts because they liked the current thing that was in the charts. Now, they're not, with the greatest of respect to them, they're not music lovers. They're not that interested in one's career or music per se. They're interested in a photograph of somebody at the time, and it might be the same people who go and see other artists. But the fans who come to see me now are people who have survived all that time. There are other people who've kind of got into me through just a snap decision that they've made in their lives. Let's go and see her. I liked Caravans, and that might be 15 years after Caravans. They've come to see a show. They've got hooked. They're still there. There's these people. I'm sure if you spoke to the people sitting on the front row of my audience last night, you might have got a person from each of those categories. But what I do want to have is I do want to keep the people who've loved me for many, many years happy, but I also want to keep just abreast of the times as well. I do want people to say, that's Barbara Dickson, that is what she does, and I don't want them to say January, February is what I do.
Absolutely not. Well,
that's a real problem. There's nothing wrong with January, February, but it was 27 years ago. I am not the woman with the curly hair who sang January, February, because I've worked constantly ever since. And also I say to the people, sometimes I sit in a taxi in London and the taxi driver says, do you still work? And I just burst out laughing because it's so funny. The reason he's saying that is I'm not a judge on X Factor.
Yeah, you haven't been on the telly lately, I suppose, Mind you, it's better than saying, didn't you used to be Barbara Dickson?
Yes, and also, if you are on telly, what are you going to be on?
Well, there's nothing. There's
really
that's
the problem
there now for artists of your kind.
There's nothing there, is there, for people
I suppose
like me?
ultimately that this DVD will be a beautiful little snapshot captured in time. and it's there for
Yeah.
everybody to watch.
Yeah.
And I think that you can't say fairer than that. It captures a moment.
Well, I have lovely experiences with my audience because I sign at the end of my shows. And I'm interested in signing because I'm not just interested in selling merchandise. I'm interested in seeing the people who come and see me play. I want to see them, and I want to meet them. And I remember, who was the guy who did do da 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 da? The guy who was the vocal performer who used to do tracks of vocals.
Bobby McFerrin.
Bobby McFerrin. Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
He used to come to the door of the theatre as the audience were coming out to thank them for coming.
Right. Well, how good is that?
Now, isn't that incredible? Well, I don't do that, but people who are interested
Yeah.
in saying hello to me can wait behind. And I love it. I love it when it's life-affirming for me when they say, we love The Water is Wide. God, it's fantastic. Like the fans said last night on the front row, they were talking about that in particular. And how much they enjoyed The Witch of the Westmere Lands and the new things they'd never heard before. But I listen to the people and I listen to what they've got to say. I don't please them.
No.
If they say, why didn't you sing Answer Me? I said to a man in Glasgow, I'm going to put that back in the set because you deserve to have Answer Me. So occasionally I'll take a note from somebody, but I don't really, I do what I want to do, but within the parameters of being sensible and doing stuff and being creative and moving on.
The lovely thing about that is that basically these people are telling you that you have been a part of their life.
Yes, and
an important part.
They're telling me that they like what I'm
Yeah.
doing. It is very, very supportive. People say, we love you, we love what you're doing, we love the songs, continue to give us these songs and we will continue to play. Now that's a license to enjoy yourself, isn't it?
Well, that's the artist-audience trust thing.
Yeah, and the lovely thing also is they come along, this man will come up and he'll say, my wife's too embarrassed to say hello, she's standing over there, but I've come to tell you that it was fantastic and those other people standing with my wife have never seen you play before and they think you're fantastic. People bring other people,
Yeah,
they
of
get
course
kind
they
of
do,
involved
yeah.
and they say, you'll love her. And they'll say, the other ones will say, oh, I don't want to see her. She was the one who did January, February. You know, there'll be a lot of that.
Yeah,
and they'll be dragged along and their life
away.
will be transformed
Yeah.
momentarily. And that's what I always say about James Taylor. You watch James Taylor in concert, your life is transformed.
Well, Barbara, I have to say, your music has been part of my life for a great many years. I don't want to make you feel old, but it's wonderful that you're out there still playing and performing. I think the DVD is going to excite a lot of people. And, of course, they will be able to buy it on your tour in February of next year. And I, for one, am going to be there and wholeheartedly want you to continue doing what you're doing. Thanks for talking to us today, Barbara.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Pleasure.